up, Suquamish Tribal Chairman Leonard Forsman gives insight into Seattle's Tribal Nation Summit. And a new COVID variant is appearing around the world. Should we be worried as we head toward fall? Plus, our regular contributor discusses the Republican presidential candidates. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Thank you for joining us. We begin today in the South, where U.S. Treasurer and Mohegan Chief Lynn Malerba, as well as Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo, visited a federally recognized tribe in Virginia for the first time. Since President Biden was sworn into office, the U.S. Treasury says it has conducted over 700 meetings with tribal leaders. That includes one last week with the Chickahominy Indian tribe in eastern Virginia. The official visit was meant to highlight the impact of the American Rescue Plan and gather feedback on how the Treasury Department can better serve indigenous nations. Tribal leaders told Malerba that the creation of the Office of Tribal and Native Affairs is making a difference. While that office is a priority of the Biden administration, there is no permanent structure in place for it to exist past this presidential period. Congress would need to enact legislation in order to make it permanent. Now to Arizona, where a skull found in a local preserve has been identified, and it belongs to a missing Navajo man. The skeletal remains and clothing were discovered in January at the South Mountain Park and Preserve near Phoenix. Authorities released a composite sketch and description that prompted Dean Seneca to contact investigators to ask if the remains could be that of her missing brother. Last month, DNA testing confirmed the skull is in fact her brother and Navajo Nation citizen Gerald Seneca. He was last seen on January 1st, 2020, and his family has been desperately seeking answers for over 3 years. Phoenix Police spokesperson Sergeant Robert Shearer said the homicide investigation is ongoing, but declined to answer specific questions about the case. In Colorado, the family of Destiny Thompson has filed a lawsuit over her tragic death. In August 2021, Thompson was on her way to lunch with her stepmother when she was fatally shot by Colorado police. She was 7 months pregnant at the time, and her unborn child was also killed. Officers were responding to a shoplifting call at a Target store and were looking for a female suspect described as white or Hispanic wearing a white tank top. Thompson fit part, but not all of that description, and was questioned by police. As tensions escalated, an officer began shooting, with a spokesperson saying they believed Thompson posed a, quote, imminent threat at the time. Since then, her family has been frustrated with the district attorney's decision not to charge the officers last year. Thompson's family has now filed a wrongful death and excessive force lawsuit. They are alleging her race, being part Hispanic and Native American from the Crow Creek Sioux tribe, played a role in her being targeted. Moving internationally, the country of Ecuador has voted to ban oil drilling, ultimately protecting millions of acres of land in the Amazon rainforest. This vote marks a major win for indigenous rights, as it is the first time a country has voted on a ballot initiative limiting resource extraction in the Amazon. According to the National Electoral Council of Ecuador, 59% of voters rejected the oil drilling, while 41% voted in favor. The Amazon's Yasuni National Park is the largest protected area in Ecuador. The 2.5 million acre region holds Ecuador's largest crude oil reserves, which cross through indigenous Yasuni land. Environmental collective Yasunidos and indigenous leaders who have been defending the Amazon for over a decade pushed government officials to include a vote for oil drilling on the next presidential election ballot. The historic referendum means all state and federal oil drilling in the region must end all current and future operations. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Suquamish Tribal Chairman Leonard Forsman was the first Native person to serve as a regent for the University of Washington and has served on his tribal council for more than 30 years. He is president of the affiliated tribes of the Northwest Indians and, among other boards and committees, sits on the Seattle Waterfront Steering Committee. Forsman is deeply involved in protecting, expanding, and celebrating Indigenous rights, culture, and lifeways. ICT's Stuart Huntington caught up with him to ask about the City of Seattle's Tribal Nation Summit and relations with the city.
The relationship with Seattle is a long one, of course, for Suquamish. Of course, the city's named after Chief Seattle, who's an ancestral leader of the Suquamish tribe and was born and raised here and is buried here and had great influence throughout the SAOC during his life between 1786 and 1866. He witnessed the first explorers in the area, traded with Hudson's Bay Company, and then saw the city of Seattle be settled and land settled prior to being cleared for settlement through the treaty, and eventually signing the treaty that enabled the United States to legally occupy the land, which they hadn't been doing prior to that, and then established a reservation and preserved certain treaty rights. So obviously, Chief Seattle, through his work as a diplomat and peacemaker, was acknowledged by the city founders to have the city named after him. So now the relationship with Seattle includes not only our treaty fishing rights and also our cultural presence, but also the urban Indian presence in the city has been strong, and we've had relationships with the urban Indian organizations for over the decades as well. So it kind of creates a somewhat complex but nurturing, for the most part, relationship between the tribes in the city. Of course, we have our challenges, but from a cultural perspective, the tribes have worked together pretty well to kind of come together and acknowledge the importance of the city and its politics and its investments in preserving our culture and respecting our history.
Are we in a new era? Is the Indigenous community taking some new steps with the municipal leadership?
Well, I think that it's been more proactive in the recent years. Of course, we deal with not only the city, but also other governments such as King County and Port of Seattle that overlap in their responsibilities to upholding our treaty rights and also respecting us. Our cultural protocol when we talk about events and celebrations. And there's also the Muckleshoot tribe as well that is present as well. And we work together to take care of those responsibilities and hold them accountable for what they're legally required to do and also what we think they're culturally required to do. Tim Rainon is the new tribal relations director for the city. He's been great in trying to do proactive outreach to the tribes, and Mayor Harrell has also been building upon the work of previous administrations to recognize and respect the neighboring tribes in the area.
Were you encouraged with the Tribal Nation Summit and then the recent report that came out of the summit?
Yeah, I was encouraged by the format of the summit and how a lot of the lead directors of the various departments were present, and hearing the testimony of the people representing the tribal governments and also the people that represent some of the urban programs as well, because of the pretty large group of urban Indians that we have in the area as well. So to hear some of those themes that kind of are present with all of the parties, the governments and the nonprofits, working kind of on the same issues of trying to reach out to people who have mental health and substance abuse problems, and then also trying to provide, adequate housing, and then also addressing the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and people came across as an important part of the discussion, which of course includes everybody involved in Indian country. So I think those were important messages that were heard, and we've got more work to do. But I think that there's great opportunity there.
I understand the next step is a scheduled meeting between Indigenous leaders and the city's Parks Department, which, among other things, oversees some salmon habitat.
Wherever we can improve habitat for salmon will be very welcome, fighting a really difficult battle against climate change and development and past land use that has really severely impacted the spawning grounds of our salmon. So, the more we can improve the ecosystem and the stream river systems, the better. So every little bit helps. And I know that the city does have has properties that could use some investment in trying to improve those habitats.
Is there another area where you'd like to see better working relationships with the city and the urban native population and the tribes?
Well, I think that we need to, build upon some of the challenges that were identified in the summit. And I really appreciate them coming out with the summary report. And I'll be looking at that to try to find out places where we can amplify, but also just making sure that the city is recognizing from an environmental treaty fishing resource perspective their responsibility to honor our treaty fishing rights, and when seeking permits for work that they consult with us on a government-to-government basis, which they've done in the past, and we want to make sure that continues in the future.
Chairman, thank you so much for visiting with us today.
All right, you're welcome. Hoithchet.
A new strain of COVID is emerging around the world. It is so new that scientists aren't sure what kind of threat to expect. The strain, officially named BA.286, has been nicknamed Parola. Epidemiologist Dean Seneca is here to tell us about the evolving background of this COVID strain. He is the founder of Seneca Scientific Solutions and worked at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention during the Ebola crisis. Welcome back, Dean.
Thanks for having me.
We know that very few cases have been reported so far, but it looks like hospital rates are also creeping up. Have you heard of anything yet in Indian country?
Oh, not anything specific to Indian country, but I do know that this variant is really raising a lot of eyebrows and keeping the most cool, calm, collected epidemiologists on the edge of their seats, because it all comes to how this this latest COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 virus is mutating.
Specifically, what about this mutation is alarming epidemiologists?
Okay, so basically it's in the spike proteins. So during let's say the Omicron outbreak, right? This virus was mutating to about 28 to 32 mutations every time it was evolving. And before that, if we went all the way back to Alpha, it was mutating like something like 12 to 15 mutations every time it was evolving. Well, this new virus is mutating at 35 mutations every time it's evolving, and it's not predictable. For example, the Omicron variant is very predictable. It's almost like a ladder prediction. And it was really, really nice because we as epidemiologists can focus our vaccine to fit the keys of that specific Omicron virus, right? It was nice and predictable, and this is what we like. With this new variant, this new BA286, it's not fitting this ladder pattern, and it's very, very unpredictable. So we're like, oh my God, this could be another wave of Omicron, or this could be something much more severe. Let's hope not. But we do know for certain that there are 16 of these mutations that are frontline protections, vaccinations, and natural infection will not protect people against.
Do we know yet what types of people are most likely to get sick from this strain?
Yes, we do. We know that the elderly are more likely to get ill from this strain, and some of our young populations. So if you are an at-risk person, if you have pre-existing conditions, if you have diabetes, if you have cancer, if you're immune compromised, I would definitely take extra precautions as we watch this new virus take a role in our throughout the country and in our communities. We have the other big thing is that our surveillance is not really good. We're kind of moving in the dark with this because, during the pandemic, we had very good surveillance. We had people getting tested. We had people reporting and so forth and so on. We don't really have that ability right now. We're really watching the wastewater and where the COVID-19 and these variants are showing up in wastewater, and that's our best surveillance, which, for person-to-person infection isn't really that effective.
We know that right now so many people are tired of hearing about COVID. There's a really big strain on talking about COVID. What is your best pitch for the viewers listening about why they should remain vigilant and stay safe?
Well, because this is something new, I think we really have to keep on board with this. We have to really keep monitoring this. This is a new strain of the virus. And what do viruses do? They continue to mutate to be more effective, right? To be more transmittable or to be more severe. And that's what we don't want. We don't want this virus to become more severe. And our biggest fear is that it's more transmittable and severe. So folks, our elderly, our cultural leaders, our language speakers, those that really hold the keys to our culture really need to step it up and take extra precautions regarding prevention. And that is wearing a mask, safe social distancing, keeping good ventilation in the homes, and doing all those extra things because we don't know. Scientists really don't know right now the extent of severity of this new BA286 virus.
Well, Dean Seneca, we thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Last week, candidates vying for the Republican Party's nomination shared their visions for the future of the country. 9 presidential hopefuls qualified for the debate, but only 8 took the stage as former President Donald Trump opted out. Here to talk more about this is ICT regular contributor John Tesuta. Hi, John. It's great to see you today.
Hello. Good to be back.
What were your takeaways from this debate?
Well, for one, as we saw in the last several cycles, both on the Republican side and then on the Democrat side, a huge stage to have that many candidates on there. It really makes it a challenge to be able to focus in on what any particular candidate is saying, as they're all striving to yell over each other. interrupt each other. So it's a good show, and a bit hard to say right now, kind of, who stands out of that crowd and what were their main points. I think there were some interesting places that there seemed to be some general agreement, and some interesting places in which there was a variety of viewpoints, I guess you could say.
Was there a single particularly surprising moment that stood out to you?
I thought that former governor and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley had a couple of good standout moments where she was able to express her both leadership as having been a former governor and also her sort of international acumen that she acquired representing the United States at the UN. And I thought because there were other people on the stage, including former VP Mike Pence and others who have years of experience as well, and in sort of foreign policy credentials as well. But I thought she really stood out, to my mind, on those foreign policy issues really well. I thought she expressed herself well. I thought she did a good job of kind of distinguishing herself well from former President Trump, but not quite as stridently as a few of the others did, who sort of attacked him very directly. So I thought she had a good performance overall.
So many people were saying, in fact, that they thought her delivery was more of a general election debate rather than a primary.
Certainly, I think although she did sort of hit on the sort of red meat Republican issues well, she talked about energy and how our energy policy affects our national security. Again, playing well to her background and foreign policy. I thought she did a good job with that. Yep, I think she was trying to, but I think when people say that, one of the main things they're taking from that is she really tried to establish herself separately from former President Trump, but not in the same way the other folks on the stage. So some of the other 7 people on the stage either attacked him directly in a very, almost personal manner, and others, I would say, kind of cozied up to him in a sense. And so I thought that she did a good job of sort of staying in between those two. And I think it's true that if she makes it through the primary season, if she were the candidate, it would put her in a better position possibly going into a general election. So I think that's true. And maybe, I don't know any of her campaign consultants, but certainly I think she's positioned herself well into the future in the campaign.
Of the 8 candidates who did take the stage, which presidential hopeful do you think would have the most knowledge on the federal government's trust and treaty obligations to tribal nations?
Well, I would say in general that Governor Doug Burgum from North Dakota probably has the most extensive experience. Obviously, North Dakota is Indian country, a lot of tribes there. Tribes that have some very sophisticated issues, from energy policy to healthcare issues, law enforcement issues. And Governor Burgum has worked pretty closely with the tribes. Obviously, the governor of a state and tribal leaders are going to have areas that they disagree on. That's just part of the relationship. But, in my experience with him, going back to my time in the federal government and from my understanding from tribal leaders in that state, that he's really tried to, as well as possible, work with them on positive solutions that are good for the state and good for the tribes. And so I think, without a doubt, he probably has the most extensive background with Indian country and a positive experience as well.
We know that, of course, the front runner for the Republican nomination is former President Donald Trump. Of the indigenous people who are Republicans that you've heard from, do you think that he still has the support of, say, Native Americans, or who do you think that Native Republicans are really looking at right now?
I would say that the views are pretty broad. I think a lot of folks see things in different candidates that they really like. And some of those who were involved working closely during the Trump administration with various agencies, including the White House. Remember Mike Pence pretty positively. As vice president, Mr. Pence got pretty heavily involved in a number of tribal issues and really used his office well, I thought, to try to push those forward in a positive way, in a very tribal positive way. So I think that there's a variety of views. The one thing that I think that probably about half of the candidates referenced, particularly in that debate, was about energy. And, there are a number of tribes, particularly those from traditionally Republican states, that for which energy is a big part of their overall economic portfolio, and have really been hurt by some of the policies coming out from the Biden administration from day one. In particular, restrictions on leasing, et cetera, which really impact them as they're trying to create value out of their natural resources. So I think those on the stage who really focused on that as part of a national policy for them, are getting some attention from those tribal leaders that are paying attention. I would caution that by saying, it's very early in the game, and we used to call the summer before presidential election crazy season, then it moved to the spring, and now we're in the year before the presidential election, and we're already seem to be in this crazy season. So it's very early. I think people are still very open to seeing what the various views of these candidates will be.
Well, ICT regular contributor John Tesuta, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.